Welcome to a football show Monday edition. That is Paul Kuharsky. I am Braden Gall, and of course, we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. And I'll tell you more about why you need to know about those two companies this weekend. Paul, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. For those who were waiting for promptly at 3 Central, I apologize. It's my fault. I've got a new laptop. I figured, boom, I'd throw it on, but little glitchy still in terms of my operation of the new laptop. And then when I got on the old laptop, I realized, boy, this thing is slow. I should get myself a new laptop.
Well, it sounds like we've accomplished a few of the steps. We just haven't squared the circle yet, is what we haven't done yet. So
yeah,
we'll get there. We'll get there, up and running. So we'll react to. I want to get your thoughts, Paul, because I know you did an episode on Thursday. Go check it out, of course. I know I did an episode Friday with Nick Suss. You should go check that out. Sort of recapping all the things that took place in the Senior Bowl. I don't truly care too much about what happened in the game itself. I do think, of course, the Jack Beck story is a great story from what took place, and he's certainly
is it back or batch?
Batch. All of them.
You're doing both.
I'm doing all of them.
Yeah. That's good. You were there for a week and you don't know how to pronounce his name.
Well, JT knows. JT is the guy who talked to him. He had a great last day, by the way, which is sort of where he kind of came out of nowhere. But it's a great story. Obviously, if you don't know, his brother tragically was killed in the New Orleans attack on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and wins MVP. So again, we'll discuss sort of what we saw. I want your sort of questions to ask and sort of give some feedback. And if there's things that I missed and that Nick and I missed through our conversation, I want your sort of perspective on some of the things maybe we missed. There's a Myles Garrett story, of course, that's now floating around that he has asked for a trade officially from the Cleveland Browns. I don't know exactly how the Titans fit into this, but I do want to sort of have some fun with this in the offseason and sort of talk through what a big swing would look like for the Tennessee Titans. And if they have the right assets to make a charge at a player like this, in theory, certainly Myles Garrett wants to go to a contender. So don't know how realistic the Tennessee Titans would be in that conversation. And of course, we have Super Bowl 59, where it's only a point. I think it's only the Chiefs by 1 point right now at time of taping. So there's certainly plenty of opportunity for this to be a very interesting and close game. If you want to get into the comment section, please do so. You can get involved that way. Thumbs up on the notifications as well. So if hypothetically, Paul, you were watching a football game on Sunday and you needed delicious meats and beverages for said party, all you got to do is give Shotgun Willie's Barbecue a call. They will organize and get everything ready for you. They will have the smoked wings, the chicken wings. They have tons of ribs, so they're going to have great racks of ribs, of course, for Sunday. And they're going to have they got the sausage and the pulled pork and everything else. So if you need some meats for your party on Sunday, I think Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, good place to go for that. And of course, everybody needs libations and beverages. So make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages. Join the in crowd and search Uber Eats. If you run out of beverages on Sunday and you need more, don't drive. Just search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, and they will deliver that booze directly to your house. Eddie and Predemption already in the comment section. Good to see you guys. So we'll get to some of your comments here momentarily, but I just want to start with Philadelphia and Kansas City, Paul. And this is not really reporting. This is not really expertise, but this is a gut feel. I feel like Philadelphia is going to win. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense. So tell me why you think that.
I think they're going to find a way to run Saquon, which will do some damage time of possession wise. And the Kansas City's more susceptible to time of possession stuff now than ever because they are less of a downfield big play offense than they have been, as their receivers have come back to earth in terms of the otherworldly plays that they made downfield in the Tyreek Hill era and stuff like that. Not that they're not still capable of getting those kind of big plays. My worry is more Kansas City's defense than its offense, really. But probably baked into the cake there is my wishfulness that Kansas City doesn't win, and my wife, who's an Eagles fan, and my son, who's a faux Eagles fan. But I think, Saquon Barkley's my reason.
I mean, that's not a bad one. I also think there's something that happens in football kind of on all levels, that when you build and build and build with a certain group of players and coaches, that you learn from all of that experience, and eventually you do kind of get over the hump. I mean, even Mahomes had to do that with Kansas City. It just sort of happens, and then you kind of build and build and build, and you're tired of not winning anymore. And their defense is just insanely good. They're great along both lines of scrimmage. the reason the Eagles won the Super Bowl against the, vaunted Patriots with a backup quarterback was because they were significantly better along both lines of scrimmage. And so if they're better along both lines of scrimmage, that gives them a really good opportunity to win. And my follow-up question is,
they're very good on both lines of scrimmage. Not that the Chiefs aren't, but both teams are.
Yep, no question about that. So is there anything to be learned? I mean, obviously the Titans went and hired Mike Borgonzi from Kansas City. Is there anything to be learned from how these two teams were constructed strategically, coaching staff? I mean, obviously trading up to draft Patrick Mahomes is no-brainer here, but the Eagles did it a totally different way with their quarterback.
Well, I think from the Kansas City perspective, I mean, we know they're otherworldly at winning close games, right? They're winning, 18 in a row of one-score games. And I remember writing a piece when the Titans were winning a ridiculous amount of close games under Mike Vrabel, where all of the analytics press was writing, it's not sustainable, it's not sustainable. From season to season in particular, they're writing, they're going to drop off this next season because they can't sustain winning the close games. Now, I'm not in any way comparing them to what the Chiefs are doing now, but I remember writing isn't it possible that Mike Vrabel just coaches a team that is sustainably good at winning close games? Where, everything, all of the analytics writers and all the analytics people say, it's a gravitational return to the mean. But here's a super extreme example of Kansas City's not anywhere near over an 18-game span, over more than one regular season's worth of games. There's no hint of them returning to the mean. Now, I wondered about the Titans. Why from one season to the next did they have to return to the mean? And couldn't they just be a team that was good in one-score games because they're well coached in one-score games, because they were well built for one-score games with Derrick Henry the way they were, yada, yada. And I believe they were good for 2 consecutive seasons there in one-score games. Now, it's hard to sustain anything for a long period of time in the NFL because of the way the league is built. And you certainly, if you're going to do it, you have to have massive star power, and the Chiefs obviously do. But there's a lesson for the Titans is get good at winning one-score games again from the Chiefs' perspective. And from the Eagles' perspective is, from both teams' perspective, be good in the trenches. And Borgonzi has said, given indications, you were there in the conversation in Mobile about inside out, right?
Yep.
And this team's not good enough inside out. I think it's a little overrated inside defensively. And it's definitely not good inside offensively.
I'm going to read their here's another. It's a small lesson from Philadelphia. I think one of the lessons from the Eagles, I think that's an excellent point. Generally speaking, over time, one-score games is a 50-50 proposition. It's sort of like recovering fumbles. Over time, recovering fumbles is about a 50-50 proposition.
I don't know if it's a 50-50 proposition in that. Who are you playing? If you're playing the Jags, it's not a 50-50 proposition because the Jags suck at it. So
over time.
Yeah, right. But if you're good at it and the Jags suck at it, it's a 75-25 proposition.
No question about it. Again, broadly speaking, over a 10-year period or a 5-year period of time, you should be about 50-50 in one-score games. Same thing with turnover margin. They tend to go, if you're plus 22 one year, it's probably going to come down the next year and vice versa.
Yeah, but same thing broadly with football, right? Over 10 years, you should be 500.
Well, in the NFL for sure. The other 2 things from Philly's side is, I don't know if it applies to the Titans, but they are looking at quarterbacks. And I don't know if I don't think Hurts specifically would be a good example of this for Brian Callahan specifically. And that is, we've talked about this, which is building an entire identity around the positive skill set of your quarterback. They went and got Jalen Hurts. And I do think that Hurts, I'll even put myself in this group. I'll be held accountable. That I think I have sort of always, even coming out of college, I sort of maybe didn't give Hurts enough credit for his ability to operate a pretty high-profile Lincoln Riley offense. And I think at the time it was Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian at Alabama, all 3 very high-profile passing attacks that go with a great rushing attack. But they built around him, and they gave him a ton of great weapons. You already mentioned it. I think Barkley is absolutely a good reason to pick the Eagles this Sunday. But I think building around him is one thing. Now, I don't know if is Jackson Dart that guy? Jalen Milroe is that guy? I don't know who the guy is you build around and why you would do, what takes a unique group of players around those guys. Is that the case for Shedeur Sanders? I think you probably would have to build around him. Maybe Cam Ward. I don't know. So I think that's one thing that they've done that, as well as anybody, is build around the strengths of their quarterback. The other thing is their last I think it's 6 straight top 40 picks. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis. What do those players all have in common? They all play defense. They have stacked that defense. It's the reason it was number 1 in the country, or number 1 in the league this year. They did draft Devontae Smith and Landon Dickerson in 21. So those are 2 top 40 picks that are key contributors on the offensive side. And it's a lot of, Jalen Reagor was their first round pick in 2020. That's atrocious. But 6 straight picks in the top 50, top 40 that have gone defense. I think that's another way to look at it. So I'm taking the Eagles, man. I don't know why. It makes no sense to pick against Patrick Mahomes in this situation, but I'm taking the Eagles. So,
well, we're both taking them. We're both rooting for them. We both wound up disappointed probably 2 weeks in a row, or
sure.
two.
Do you not NFL love the three-peat? Does the three-peat not attract you at all as a NFL lifer?
No, I don't know why. Part of it is, I don't know. Look, I understand fully, like the Patriots at their peak were not necessarily the best team. They were the best team. They functioned as the best team. They were not the most talented team. For some reason, my appreciation for that right now is down. I'm frustrated by, I don't know. I'm torn on that because I want the best team to win. I want the best team to win. I hate when somebody comes in as the 6 and gets hot and wins. I don't think that's illustrative of the season. And I also don't like the best team winning 3 years in a row and going to the Super Bowl 5 times in 6 years or whatever it is.
You're very hard to
You can't satisfy me. Yeah. I can't draw you the parameters that satisfy me. Except they don't include the 5th inning of the 5th game of the World Series that I saw. I know the parameters don't include that.
So basically, it's like I don't want the number 1 seed to win, but I don't want seeds 4, 5, 6, and 7 to win. It just has to be a 2 or a 3 that it was deserving of being there, and that's certainly the Eagles.
I want the number 1 seed to win when the number 1 seed is having an outstanding season that's disconnected from other outstanding seasons.
Well, and that really would have, like last year's Chiefs team was easy to argue not the best team in the NFL. Hard to argue they're not the best team in the NFL this year. I think it's as I've gotten older, I don't know about you. As I've gotten older, I think Jalen Hurts is a really good dude. I think Mahomes and Andy Reid are really good people, and I'm okay with like rooting for like good dudes and good people to win championships. I've never seen a three-peat in 42 years on this earth. That would be cool. I'm fine with that. I'm not offended by them winning again. As a Packers fan, I definitely do not like the Eagles. Just in general, they've beaten us twice this year, but I don't normally root in the Super Bowl for that kind of stuff. I root for like the story and like the personalities and something. I also saw an Eagles Super Bowl like just a couple of years ago as well. So it's not like the Bills. Like the one team I was rooting for was the Bills. I wanted to see the Bills do something that I've never seen before, which is win a Super Bowl. So.
I mean, I think there are a couple things at play for me. I mean, it's weird to root for Philly. My marital thing is obviously at play for it, but as a person who grew up rooting for New York teams, but faded on rooting for NFL teams, it's odd to root for a Philadelphia team.
Sure.
Here's my problem with the three-peat. Are they as good as the 49ers dynasty? Are they as good as the Steelers dynasty? Are they as good as the Patriots dynasty? I don't think they're as good as any of those dynasties.
Really? Okay.
And so, but if they win this game, they will be branded as better than all of those teams. And that'll bother me.
Was the Niners?
And I will say this, up until championship weekend, right? I have mild rooting interest, but like whoever comes out of Buffalo or Baltimore, I'm going to root for against Kansas City. So like I've got a mild rooting interest, but I could still maintain it's not a huge deal to me who wins or loses. But when you get down to 4 teams left and 2 teams, and 2 teams left, then you're compelled to root. And I'm just uncomfortable rooting when I'm not rooting for my teams. It's just not my nature. And so I don't like it because odds are I'm going to get upset if the team I'm rooting for doesn't win, but I don't really care that strongly, and it ties me up in a knot.
Well, so here's the thing. This is what I teach my daughter all the time, and because we'll watch like big time NFL games or big time college football games or a baseball game or a basketball game that's, you know, the World Series, like things that aren't related to our team. And she's always like, Dad, who are we rooting for? And then I go, who do you think? And she goes, overtime. And I say, yeah, that's exactly right. I want to see drama. I want to see excitement. It's entertainment.
Exactly. Number one.
It's entertainment. And the last two times these two played, we got thoroughly entertained. It was a phenomenal finish. And on top of that, we've got some of the extra storyline stuff. We've got some of the history that they know each other, all this stuff. And so it looks like it could be a very evenly matched game. I think it's a very smart team. I'm interested in your theory on Kansas City not being as good. I think they're in a 3 or 4 year stretch. I think they're as good as anything the Patriots delivered. Over a 15-year stretch, we're not there yet. The Niners, wasn't it 2 championships and then a break and then 2 championships or something like that? With you're talking about Montana in the 80s, I assume.
Yeah.
I think
it's probably proximity bias, but probably entirely proximity bias.
That's yeah. Which I don't have a problem with, but either way, I'm rooting for overtime. I hope it's a great game. Should be a lot of fun, and I do think you can learn some lessons. We did talk to Borgonzi, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm getting a ring."
He's already checked.
He was very clear about. Oh, I checked that. I checked that,
well,
and I think he told us he was sitting in a hotel room all by himself watching the Buffalo game in Dallas because the East-West Shrine game was taking place. And he's like, "Yeah, I was just sitting in a hotel room." I was like, "I feel so weird to be a part of building something for 16 years." And then to have to watch the Buffalo game, which is one of the great games of the playoffs and one of the great rivalries right now in the game, and to just be like unattached in a hotel room in Dallas watching the AFC Championship game. That visual is very fascinating to me. That's all. That's all that is.
Yeah, that's cool. Ed Henry's relating that he's a Yankees fan and he feels like this is the 86 World Series. I mean, the Chiefs and the Eagles are nothing akin to the Red Sox and the Mets for a Yankees fan. That's a big stretch, Ed.
Okay. All right. UV777GR. I remember the Eagles fans cheering when Michael Irvin went down with a potential spinal injury. F Philly. Yeah, I mean, look,
Eagles fans are horrible people. On-site Eagles fans are horrible people. They are. I'm a big Howard Stern fan. They've been doing stuff about, like, there was a Commander's kid, like a teenage kid, taken to the game by his parents, and they saw him go in, and they let the air out of the tires of their car. And so the game was over. At the Commander's Eagles game, they let the air out of the tires of their car. So they drove from Washington to Philadelphia, foolishly let themselves be identified as Commanders fans, and then had to wait for the parking lot to empty so a tow truck could get in so that they could get their car. They probably got home at 3:00 in the morning. I mean, the Eagles fans are terrible people.
They did wipe fecal matter on telephone poles. I mean, that's all you really need to know. They threw batteries at Santa. I agree with that. First of all, it's never been a better story or lesson to just have one of those portable tire pumps in your car, you know, like, unless it was a knife in the side.
They might have slashed them. I don't know.
Right.
I wouldn't put it past.
All right. So if you're watching the game, of course, on Sunday, and you're going to need some food and some beverages, so make sure Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for all your food and beverage needs this weekend. When you're watching Kendrick Lamar do his victory lap at halftime, you're going to need some shots and you're going to need some smoked wings. All that good stuff. So make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. All right, Myles Garrett. First and foremost, so he's as of Monday morning, he requests a trade. He's got a 5-year, $125 million contract, 2 years left on that deal. He's 29 years old. I just want to kind of put this stuff out there. If he's traded before June 1, there's a $36 million dead cap hit for Cleveland, so probably not getting traded before June 1, even if he does get moved. After June 1, I believe it's $14.8 million dead cap hit, so still a big chunk. So those are some numbers you need to know. My first question is, this could absolutely affect the top of the draft. If they are looking at a quarterback or a pass rusher, that changes potentially if Myles Garrett is on the team or not on the team. It might actually make them more interested to come up one spot to one, in theory, hypothetically. How do you think this affects the top of the draft, first and foremost?
Well, first and foremost, I think Titans fans need to I understand why they think a guy demanding a trade results in a trade, because their experience is A.J. Brown. But Deebo Samuel and DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, I think, all said they wanted trades, and they all wound up with their teams.
Didn't Brandon Ayuk do
with
the same
contracts? Thing? Yeah. So most guys who demand a trade or request a trade don't get one. He's going to be super, super costly. And despite the fact that he's one of the 3 best defensive players in football, I think Diana Rossini threw out first and second. It's hard to part with the first and the second. I mean, he's a game-changing guy. If you're a really good team, your first and a second is more like a second and a third at the back of the round. Could it happen? Certainly. Cleveland still needs a quarterback more than they need. They'll need a defensive end. But certainly could alter what they're looking to do at the top of the draft. Titans still have control at 1. He's not coming here for 2 reasons. One, the Titans are trying to gather some draft capital, and he would cost a fortune. Sam Phelan put out a trade that the Titans would never do, but that kind of was a sample of what it would cost. I mean, you'd have to give up this year's second, which is 35, and next year's first to even get in the conversation. And, along with swapping picks this year, 1 and 2. And I mean, that's just killer for the Titans. So you solve your defensive end problem, but, for a very expensive guy. So why not, go with Abdul Carter, who, is probably not going to be Myles Garrett, but probably going to be pretty good. And you don't give up all of that capital, and you've got a guy on a rookie contract, et cetera, et cetera. So also, Cleveland came right out and said, we've got no intention of trading him. So I think odds are he's in Cleveland next year. I could understand why he's disgruntled. I think Cleveland's not as bad an organization as everybody imagines. They made one really stupid move, and that was ownership, not Andrew Berry, not Kevin Stefanski.
Yep. Houston has, I think, 13 picks over the next few years and could really be a target. That's where he's from, of course, is that area. I think that one makes a lot of sense.
But they're also really good at end.
Yeah, they've got a lot of value already there. So maybe that's
what
the Titans
back.
Maybe the Titans give Houston a call and say, like, look, we'll take Danielle Hunter off your hands or something like that. But Will Anderson with Myles Garrett would be pretty nasty coming off the edge there. And again, at 29 years old, he's probably the best pass rusher of this generation. He's one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. He's going to be a top 5 sack artist, very, very fast, if not
only
already
guy
there.
to 100 by age 29, 100 sacks.
And honestly, if he wants a big extension, that might be where you have some leverage, right? If you want to tear up the contract and give him a big extension, that could be where a team has some leverage and he is okay with that. Maybe going to a team that's not as good, not that he has anything to say about it. So look, ultimately there's a very small chance of this, if none at all for the Titans. Philadelphia, the Chargers, these kinds of programs are the teams that he's going to be looking for. I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons are in on him as well. Here's the question though. Would Simmons not be interesting in this? Would Simmons be the only way you could, in theory, move your talent from inside to outside with T'Vondre Sweat? Opens up your draft at least a little bit as well. You swap 1 and 2. You still have to put more into the pot, but I don't know. Simmons is the only way it seems like it's even conceivable for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I would go. But how much are they valuing Simmons? So you give them Simmons and 1, they give you Garrett and 2, and then what else? Still,
what about Treylon Burks and Will Levis, Paul?
Yeah, there you go. That's what people are going to start throwing at us.
First round pick. They were first round grades. It was a first round pick and a first round grade.
Drill bit right here.
I knew that would get you.
I think Rand Carthon would have been more open to that than Mike Borgonzi is.
Let me ask you. By the way, and I said this on the show with Nick a little bit later on in the episode, but I want to get it across now. Universal glowing praise and compliments across the scouting and coaching world in Mobile for Mike Borgonzi. Just in general, I couldn't find it. I mean, not that anybody's going to say anything negative right now, but almost everybody I spoke to and just said, "Hey, what do you know about this guy? What do you feel about this guy? How do you what?" Give me some analysis professionally, folks that I respect and that have some insight. And almost everybody to a person is like, no, I trust him. Very positive, glowing reviews for the person, the guy, Mike Borgonzi, just for whatever that's worth. I do think the question that's more interesting is like taking a big swing, trying to go get somebody big like that. They don't come available very often, but we're seeing these huge trades in the NBA. We're seeing huge trades in the NHL. Now Myles Garrett wants a trade. I just am curious if a big time splashy move is something that this team could benefit from in general, or if that's just we need to forget all. Titans fans need to forget all about this stuff that comes out, the clicky stuff, the trade stuff, the disgruntled employee stuff, and just forget all about it and stay the course, put your head down, and acquire as many picks as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if they're making trades, I think they're going to be getting picks back involved.
Yeah.
I think it'd be shipping out a Simmons or a Landry to get what you could back. And you know, if Garrett was simply looking for a fresh start, that might be one thing. He wants out of a bad situation. This is the only team worse according to the draft standings. So I can't imagine he'd be real excited about it as a destination. Not that he's gonna dictate that. I think he's gonna wind up in Cleveland. And if not, you know, then somebody big and surprising and pretty good is gonna swoop in there and do something.
And I know he's had lots of losing seasons, but when they're good, and they've been good with Mayfield, and they had one good year, I guess, with Watson, I suppose. Or no, was it Flacco a couple years ago? If they figure out their quarterback situation, I assume most folks think that's Kirk Cousins reuniting with his former offensive coordinator. If that were to happen, they're a good roster. Like, they're ready to compete. And Cousins would throw the ball like 160 times to Jerry Jeudy. So, like, it's just like it feels like they could be good fast, and that he could get his wish just by staying put, honestly. So I don't know. What's your experience with players requesting trades?
I don't have much. I mean, I've seen some maybe middling to not good players feel like they wanted out without any real leverage. Yeah. But I don't think it's a very healthy way to go about it, especially publicly. So we'll see. Creates a lot of intrigue, a lot of clicks. Guy's a hell of a player. I mean, he's as good as gets defensively right now. And I can't imagine there's a team in the league that wouldn't want to add him to their roster. Yep. But then you start thinking about the realistic pricing, and a lot of teams then just close the book.
I don't know. I think about my team in Wisconsin going like, okay, are you a Myles Garrett away from competing? And you might be. So, you know, teams like that are the ones that could be desperate to go get him. So we'll see. Anyway, I just think it'd be interesting for the Titans to make a huge move because it'd be great for content. All right. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, of course, sponsoring a football show. Make sure you check out those two great local, amazing companies that care about the community. And, of course, make sure that all the products are free for all of you. All right. Narrative time here. It's Must Lie season, of course. I'm curious your reaction to all of the noise, all of the comments, all of the stuff that we got from being down there, all the stuff that Borgonzi and Callahan said elsewhere. In general, there is just a lot of noise, of course, about this pick. I had a prominent SEC starting head football coach smack me on the arm, and he goes, so what are they going to do? Like, it is the thing people want to know about. And, of course, I mean outside of Titans fans. So I'm curious. We've got Callahan telling us, and then I posted it and wrote a story about it. Like, look, this is not what Joe Burrow, the situation with Joe Burrow. This is not the same kind of draft where we're going to know what we're going to do. There's conflicting reports about how much this organization likes either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or any other quarterback. Of course, that's what they want. They want it to be as valuable a pick as possible so they can do what they want with it. How are you parsing out all the narratives and the conversation and the noise coming out of senior week where Borgonzi and Callahan were very, very much out there front and center?
Well, it's the noise not from them that I think people find interesting. And, I wrote a column this morning saying, chill out. This is the beginning of tweets. And if you're going to go crazy like you went with Pete Thamel saying there's a growing belief from scouts and executives that Cam Ward's likely to be the number one pick. Well, that didn't say Titans executives and scouts. So, if there's a growing consensus amongst the league that he's the number one guy, that doesn't mean he's the number one guy for the Titans. It could mean he's the number one guy that the Titans trade away because they don't like him. And then Kirk said, people inside the Titans organization believe he can elevate them to a new level per source, not per source inside the Titans. So somebody told him that the Titans like him. Well, I did some key math here. 22 days until the teams meet quarterbacks in Indianapolis, 50 days until Miami's pro day, 80 days until the draft. Now, do we think the Titans who haven't met Cam Ward have a solid opinion on Cam Ward? They're not going to meet him for 22 days. So there's 3 weeks before they meet him. There's one guy in the Titans organization who's maybe met him, right? Their Southeastern scout. And I don't know what the rules about that are, you know? So I just think
here,
it makes no sense to get ahead of yourself in terms of that.
Mario Cristobal, the head coach at Miami, and Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator for Miami, were both there a lot on Tuesday. And the Titans, all the Titans were there mostly Tuesday, some of Wednesday. And what's interesting is right before we had access to Mike Borgonzi, he was standing in the concourse with about 6 other GMs, maybe 7 or 8 other GMs, talking with Mario Cristobal for an extended period of time. There were a lot of Miami players there. We have no idea what they were talking about. Xavier Restrepo and Arroyo and Rivers. There was a lot of Miami players in the Senior Bowl. But don't tell me that you don't chat with the offensive coordinator or the head coach about what they think or know or don't know about the team or about the player. And you turn out these coaches and these GMs, and you know this, Paul, it's just important to remind folks, like, they have all the data, they have all the metrics, they have all the tape, they have all the film. They also know everybody there is to know within the industry to talk about this stuff. And they all have generally teams have a bunch of like former government spooks all over the country doing background checks on everything. Like they can get to any information they can get to. And it still doesn't mean that they have enough information to make the right decision or not. So I'm assuming you're not even are you not even allowed as a coach, Brian Callahan, to even call the player and just talk with him? Are you not even allowed to make contact with the player? Like
I don't think so at this stage. I don't.
Yeah.
I think that's restricted to, those windows you get for Zooms and visits and all of that stuff. So, I mean, the idea that they've formed anything solid, I think there are stages. You form maybe I would call it a Jello opinion. So I think Rand Carthon probably had a Jello opinion of these quarterbacks coming out of the season from having done scouting work and everything. But Borgonzi was with the team that had no quarterback concerns. So maybe he was casually looking at quarterbacks thinking, I might get a job where I'm going to need to know what's going on with the quarterbacks. But he also had a full-time job where he didn't need to know what was going on with the quarterbacks. So, Brinker had an eye on it, but not with any Callahan input and not with any Borgonzi input. So, plus there's too much time to scout here. January, February, March, April. I'd throw April away. I think the draft should be the beginning of April. They're never going to change it because they like the calendar the way it is. But still a long, long time for opinions to be formed. And to have a super strong opinion on a guy before you meet him is foolish. To have any super strong opinions is foolish because you have to be malleable, right? And you have to be willing to hear another guy's opinion and say, oh, yeah, maybe that moves me a little bit. Or to meet a guy and say, oh, that really impresses me. I'm going to move my dial up. Oh, that really disappoints me. I'm going to move my dial down. And if you have a super strong opinion on anything at this stage and you're entrenching yourself on anything, hurts your ability to be flexible. That's not just with Cam Ward. That's with anybody at any stage of the draft. Oh, I really like this guy as a 4th round receiver right now. But, something could come up that totally turns me off to him between now and then.
So Ed asked the question, how much do the Titans actually have to do to get the narrative out there? Wouldn't the agents be doing a lot of that automatically? Right now, that is happening with Jackson Dart. It's not just the agent. It's a lot of folks that are pumping up Jackson Dart. Maybe rightly so. Again, we're talking late 2nd, maybe early 3rd round pick in terms of pumping him up. But isn't that the case? Like, you've got the agent out there that's going to be doing this. The college coaches are always going to be doing this. There's plenty of people who are going to be willing to talk up Cam Ward. Or
I don't know.
Shedeur Sanders.
Do you need a lot of work to get the narrative out that the top 2 quarterbacks are looking good for the number 1 spot in the draft? I mean, you did a piece last week at paulkuharsky.com. Thank you for the 2 things that you wrote, which were great, about how do the Titans ultimately know if one of these 2 guys are the guy at number 1 and you stake a good share of your career on it? And the answer is, you really don't. And we looked at it, right? What were there? 8 guys taking number 1 or 7 guys taking number 1 in the last 10 years. One of them was a grand slam home run, Joe Burrow, and everybody thought it coming in. One of them, everybody thought was a grand slam home run, and Trevor Lawrence, and 4 years in, he hasn't been. And all the rest of them are pretty middling guys. I mean, Baker Mayfield's turned into a pretty damn good quarterback, and he's going into his 9th coordinator in 9 years, and he wasn't very good at his original place, which was a mess. Yeah. But somebody falls in love with, I mean, they go number one because they're quarterbacks. Yeah. And there's a varying degree there. I mean, who's the worst one of that list? Jameis Winston throws as many interceptions as he throws touchdowns. Somebody's going to be in love with him. I don't think the hype train needs to roll much to get people hyped about these two quarterbacks. It's there already.
Redemption says that sound clip of Liam Cohen saying Duval. I do think
it's like it was imitating somebody weird.
I don't know. I know. Total side note. I do think they are smart. If Jacksonville's like a social media team and like production team and the coach are smart, Liam Cohen, they will lean into the fact that he totally screwed it up.
Yeah.
Just lean into it and be like, well, can you coach me? Like do an entire video series of trying to coach Liam Cohen into doing Duval, and it'll be funny again. Make fun of yourself and people will forget about it and move on. Anyway, here's a question for you. I do think that the only way to your point about early in the process not knowing, I think there is one side of this that you would know, and that is if you know for sure that they are not even like top 20 grades.
Yeah,
like they're so that we have Shedeur Sanders at 46, and we would take him at the top of the first round if he's available. If you have those types of grades, the way they did the way the Titans specifically did on all the quarterbacks in the Kenny Pickett draft, when they wanted Desmond Ridder, for example, but they weren't going to take him until the 3rd round. Like they had those grades appropriately pinned in the late 3rd rounds for all those players. If they have those types of grades for these
they
players,
didn't have those grades. I would think they didn't have those grades pinned down on February 3rd.
Probably right. Not.
You have those grades pinned down in mid-April, mid to early April.
Otherwise, if you are leaning towards Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, you are going to, and you think you're close to deciding, or hey, we know that we've got Cam Ward ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Let's say hypothetically. We have now, to your point, 79 days to make decisions and to confirm, and we are going to use all 79 to confirm that when we wake up on draft morning, we know what we're doing, and that's it. Otherwise, you're going to use every single second. So here's my question about the trade, though. Is the perfect window to trade this pick is it between the combine and free agency? Is that the right window to move this pick?
It might be the ideal window to trade this pick, but I don't know if it's a realistic window to trade this pick because everybody's going to sort out something to a degree in free agency. You don't even know what you're going to necessarily come out of free agency with. So say you like Cam Ward, you don't love him, but you think you got something going with Matt Stafford. Well, you have to see what happens with Matt Stafford before you decide what you're doing with the pick. No,
and ultimately that's my question. Does it change it does not change your leverage if your free agent decision making is clearly a rental. If you're going to go sign Jacoby Brissett or fill in the blank, right? With a guy who's just you clearly know is just a placeholder.
I think anybody's a placeholder. Every guy that's available to you, barring some really surprising trade,
like Brock Purdy or something,
has some kind of deficiency, most typically age. And so thank you, Atlanta Falcons, I think a lot of teams would say right now, because you showed that it's not preposterous idea that I might sign somebody or do something for Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's an outlier here because Matthew Stafford would cost a lot, I think, in a trade. But what's the value for Matthew Stafford? I don't know.
He's the best option for them, number one. But also, that doesn't mean he's more than a 1-year rental, and you could still draft a player to sit behind him.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So he's a 2-year. Even if he's a 2-year, like right. I would, in my ideal world, Matthew Stafford would be the guy. You'd go with him this year, period, and next year he'd be in front of your 1st-round draft pick. Getting him ready, and hopefully that guy would sit most of the year like Penix did this year. So that would be my ideal scenario. So if you made a move for Matthew Stafford during the free agency period here, Does that signal the league that there's no way you're taking a quarterback number one? No, I don't think it does.
Yeah. I think the vast
So
majority.
what's the move that you could make that tells everyone you're not doing quarterback number one? I don't think there is.
Maybe not. Again, maybe that's where as somebody said, Geno Smith. Geno Smith's played what, 8-9 years? It's not like he's a young player either.
He's not available.
But I think Purdy's the one that comes to mind.
I mean, Geno Smith only becomes available in a world where Seattle makes a big move to draft a quarterback, and then it's not until after the draft that he would be available, which is too late for everybody. So it'd be a bad move by Seattle. He would be grooming a guy for a year, probably playing in front of that guy, and he would be a free agent next year.
The other question would be, could you put Geno Smith into the package to move up and then acquire a ton of draft picks and get a starting quarterback for a couple of years? There's
I don't know.
things
Are
like
there
that.
rumblings about Geno Smith? I would think Seattle has things to do and would be a year away, or maybe they spend a draft pick on that guy this year and have two quarterbacks. It's no sin in having two quarterbacks.
Well, I think it's because he's a rental this year. He's a 1-year deal this year. And I think the interesting there is I don't think that he is. This is kind of weird. Maybe it's not fair for Geno Smith, because he's had 2 record-setting seasons for Seattle. I think he set the passing record, single-season passing yards record 2 years in a row, which is more than I ever expected out of Geno Smith.
Sure, a lot of teams would be happy to have Geno Smith.
Right. So I don't know if Geno Smith is the guy. Like, I'm hesitant to spend money on Sam Darnold. But, and I know that's parsing out real, being real nitpicky, but like, those guys aren't. I'm not spending 5 years and $150 million on Sam Darnold.
Not 5. You spend the 3 where you can get out of it. I mean, it might look like a 5-year contract, but it wouldn't be. I think people are very quick to downgrade. This is a thing that bugs me. I should write about it. Like, I think, well, it's got to be a quarterback that could take you to Super Bowl, or why would you want? All these moves have to be. This team had 3 wins. I mean, you get a quarterback that take you to 9 wins. That's a massive improvement. There are going to be some steps here. You're not going from a 3-win quarterback to a Super Bowl quarterback unless you luck into a draft year where there's Joe Burrow or Andrew Luck. And guess what? You did not win that lottery.
Yeah, no, you didn't. This was my whole frustration with Titans fans about Dak Prescott. Don't compare me to the almighty. Compare me to the alternative. That is what this is. It's what are your alternatives? Trey Lance and Will Levis?
Yeah,
I'm good. I'm good.
I don't like Dak Prescott at all, but he's better than any of these guys that we've talked about. Any of them. Particularly if Dallas was, I mean, this conversation's over because the Shedeur to Dallas conversation is pretty much over, but because Prime's not going there. But, if you had an option for that guy, particularly if Dallas was picking up some money, how would you not engage in that conversation at the very least?
Z-Dean does make an interesting point, in which case, and I'm curious if you think this helps or hurts the Titans, but Z-Dean says, do you think the market will drive down the Sam Darnold bidding? Only the Raiders, Giants, and Titans are in the top 15 of cap space and quarterback needy and anywhere near the top of the draft. And so the question is, what does free agency, to your point about that window maybe not being, you're not going to get it done probably in there. When did they trade? Was it like April? It was like 3.5 weeks before the draft when they traded the number 1 pick when John Robinson traded
2 weeks.
it. 2 weeks before? Okay.
I think that's dismissing quarterback needy teams. I think to say there are only 3 quarterback needy teams is really dismissing some. I mean, is Pittsburgh quarterback needy? Pittsburgh has 2 guys that aren't under contract, don't they?
I think they've got their quarterback on the roster. I don't think it's Justin Fields. But again, to the Jalen Hurts conversation, if you wanted to sign Justin Fields, I like that, but you need to build a whole offense around Justin Fields. And that to me, all right. Now,
Pittsburgh's a team that can be talking about not having sufficient quarterback, right? Like Russell Wilson gets them to playoff or playoff fringe, and they can't go further than that. So they're looking now for the next step, right? Russell Wilson here, which I would hate, could maybe get you to 8, right? So that would be a step you want. I don't want that. Most people wouldn't want that, right? But that's a guy like Russell Wilson could get you from 3 to 8. 8. Right. Which is a significant step here. Now in Pittsburgh, he's insufficient because the expectations in Pittsburgh are better than what Pittsburgh's been doing. The expectation in Pittsburgh is that you go win a damn playoff game after this long drought of not winning playoff games. So in Pittsburgh, they should be looking for better than Russell Wilson. Now, I don't know how they get it, but for all these teams that need a step up in quarterback, how do you get it is the big question, especially given this draft.
Austin says Titans' whole franchise has only been bridge quarterbacks, and we never had a great quarterback. Tired of it. Look, heard. Jason McDonald says, and the Rams have a Super Bowl quarterback. What would their alternative be? Why would they can't let him walk? I tend to agree. McVay is not.
I tend to agree, but they need to reset at some point financially and age-wise.
Yeah. So ultimately, to your point, this does come down to Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Do you have a personal preference between the two if you're drafting someone there?
Yeah, I prefer Ward, but I'm still, and I reserve the right to change my mind on Ward, but I'm not in love with it. I'm not in love with him.
I have a tough time putting either of them in the top 10, but there's a quarterback tax. I have waffled. I've been Shedeur over Ward for a long time for most of this, and I'm sort of now you start to look at like, and I talked to some folks around the Miami program while I was down there trying to get some insight, and I think the whole thing about Cam Ward sort of holding himself to an extraordinary level of excellence and then holding everyone else to that same standard of excellence, I think is a really positive development for him. I think it's one thing to hold everybody else accountable for things, but if you're not going to do it yourself, I think that's the key, right? If you do it for yourself, then I think you can do it for everybody else. I think Shedeur's got a slightly more accurate arm and a little bit more touch, but I think Cam Ward kind of has more of everything else, a little bit better athlete, a little bit more control. The issue I have with Shedeur is not the arm strength, which I know TD wrote about on ESPN, which is I don't think it's the arm strength that's the issue. I think it's, and I talked to Matt Miller about this and played it on the show on Friday, it is stay in the pocket. Shedeur Sanders just floats around. He drifts out of the pocket all the time, and the Titans just saw a quarterback who didn't have great pocket presence and awareness. Cam seems to do better at that stuff, but still also needs to show that he can throw on time and in rhythm. So I see two totally, like if you'd have told me, Paul, as someone who's watched college football and covered college football for 20 years, if you'd have told me at the beginning of the season that the two players that are going to be the top two candidates to go number one, that it was going to be Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, I would have been like, those are great players, but I don't know. Like I've just never believed that those are guys that are top picks. It's just never, maybe that's a me problem. I don't know.
No, I don't think it's a you problem. I mean, I think this is where the conversation is nationally. Maybe not nationally. I mean, I think national with people not putting teams in the mix think, oh, the two quarterbacks, that's the top. But I think for teams that are looking at those quarterbacks, I don't know. What's the conversation in New York? Are they talking, are Giants fans talking about getting one of those two quarterbacks? Or are they gun shy like most Titans fans are? I suspect there's some gun shyness there, especially after the Daniel Jones experience, which was a lot longer than the Will Levis experience. So I just, you can't wait forever, obviously. And I'm not asking the Titans to wait forever, but I can certainly see a scenario where they wait here. They're not going to pass on a generational talent. I think nobody thinks that Chad Brinker was talking about one of the quarterbacks, or that he was necessarily talking about anybody specifically. He was saying if one of these guys presents himself as that, we're not going to pass on him. And I think most of us thought, well, he's not necessarily talking about anybody. Maybe he's talking about Hunter. Maybe he's talking about Carter. Maybe there's not a generational talent in this, and he sees it as a good opportunity to get out. And, 65% of Titans fans in a poll I ran want him to get out.
And I'm 100% trade out of that spot, at least to 3, if nothing else. I do think you can win a trade or maybe solidify a trade by being willing to take payment in the future, deferred draft payment to next year. If you can get first and seconds next year, take your third this year, move down 3 spots, and don't be greedy this year. That's my theory on this. Is like, look, you need a lot of picks between 20 and 80, 20 and 100, and you have 1. If you can get a couple more of those this year, they're later in the 60s or 70s, and get your premium stuff next year, I think that's the strategy.
Does 1 to 3 get you a first? That's the question. That's the quarterback tax question, because it seems like it's more likely to get you a second.
If you defer to next year, I think you can get a first.
Yeah. Well, if you get a first for that, that's a pretty big home run, especially if you've got a pretty clear read. Like if Carter's going to be there for you at 3, that's pretty enticing. Here's one thing I wanted to say about Sanders. And this is a little bit old. This comes out of East West Shrine. There was some stuff that came out of East West Shrine, like, hey, he went to East West Shrine and teams loved him. They thought he did what they asked and he was polite and all that. That's nothing. That's nothing. That a kid went there. He didn't do everything that was asked because did we cover this last week? I mean, he was asked. We weren't together last week.
No, we were not.
I mean, people would have wanted him to throw. They weren't asking him to throw because they were told ahead of time he didn't throw. He wasn't going to throw.
Right.
So don't give me this BS that he did everything he was asked. He didn't. All the video was him standing or pacing. And we saw him walk into a room that the Titans were in and walk out of the room.
Paul,
I mean, was he excellent at that?
He conjugated his verbs very well. Okay.
I mean, this could have been press. Sure. Some of this stuff could have been press releases from his agency that he did everything that he was asked, and they found him to be super nice. Well, that's great. I mean, what are kids doing at the East-West Shrine Bowl? They going there and being assholes? I mean, once in a while a kid does that, and what happens is draft stock falls.
It gets out.
So
it gets
most
out.
of them go there and they do everything that's asked. And when they do everything that's asked, that means like if they're told to run over there and run back, they do it.
Interesting.
If they're told to throw, they do it. So I don't buy this stuff that he goes there and somehow helps himself in a huge way by doing what's asked of him and being polite. I mean, that suggests to me they felt he had a lot to recover from or to start to set the tone about who he is. If that's some big win.
That's table stakes, man, for sure. Austin says, Abdul Carter, number 1, trade back for Will Howard. I'm an Ohio State homer, sue me. Will Howard's an intriguing player in like round 4 or something like that. Z Dean says, I think another thing with Shedeur is that he was homeschooled. I don't know about that. He has played for his dad, high school and college. Ward has been in multiple systems and been successful in all of them. That's fair. Although the Incarnate Word system with Eric Ward, who's now the head coach, I think, at North Texas, who was his OC at Washington State, and then the Miami, they're not totally like the Washington State and Incarnate Word systems are identical, and then the system at Miami wasn't that different. So, it wasn't that different.
I mean, was it complex in Incarnate Word? I don't care if it's complex or not. No. The competition he's playing it's like Malik Willis being at Liberty. So I'm unimpressed with the competition level.
I think the difference is he then went and had one of the best seasons in ACC history. So I do think, and then he went to Washington State and showed it. So yeah, I think there's that. This is interesting here. Jason says, forget the position. And Jason, I love you, man, but forget the position. If they have any first round grade on either quarterback, they have to take him. I like Ward. Not if the grade is 24th.
I mean, I had this fight with Wycheck all the time. He kind of said the same thing, Frank Wycheck. Like, if you have the guy at 11, he would say kind of the same thing. Like, if that's your guy, go get your guy. And I would say, well, if you have him at 11 and you think the whole league has him at 11 and you take him at 2, you're wasting value spots there. Now, I think teams that are really, really good at this, I think the Bill Belichick Patriots early, where they put how many? Remind me what like 85 guys on their draft board or 120?
Yeah,
and
very
they said,
small number.
Our guys are coming out of these 85 or these 120 players who we love, who fit what we do. And we don't really care how the league values them. We have them valued this way. And maybe once in a while, their first rounder was a surprise. Certainly more recently, but I'm talking in the dynastic time. They turned up with some pretty damn good players.
Yeah, and here's the other thing to remember.
But the Titans are not that.
No. Every team has a very specific number of first round grades on the board. Like the Titans could go into this draft and be like, we have 12 players that are graded as a first round pick. And so they feel that they need to plan to pick one of those players in the top 12. It's no different than any other draft. Most teams do this where they go, oh, this year there's 19 first round grades this year. We've got to get one of those 19 guys. And if not, we're looking to get out of there. That's it.
And they used to tell you how many. Floyd or Jeff. And even after that, I think you used to be able to get that out of them. Then they felt like it came to hurt them in negotiations. Now things are more slotted, but still they feel like it hurts them in some minor negotiating things about how the guarantees are meted out or whatever flexibility there is in contracts that are very inflexible. This hurts them. When you say, hey, how many first rounders did you have?
I'm looking at it right now. So for example, I have been told that Caleb Farley, for example, was their last first round graded player in that draft class.
And so while they 19,
so while they knew there was risk and they knew there was the injury problem and they knew like they had him graded as a first round pick.
Right.
And if they would, and if he was the last one on the board and he's available and you're picking, then you don't trade back. Like that's why they do, like when they all say, when these GMs and coaches all say, well, the hay's in the barn, we do all the work beforehand, which is what Borgonzi said to us last week. It's because they're doing the work to put those benchmarks in. And if we have 6, because I think the number this year could be like 14, 12 to 14. Low. If it's 12 to 14 to 15 players that are first round grades and you trade down to 12, well, you're getting one of your first round grades, even if that guy's risky, even if that guy has flags or problems. And so from what I understand in that particular situation, it's like, oh, we didn't think he was going to get to us. We're, if he wasn't available and we didn't have our guys, we would trade back. Well, he was available. He was a first round grade, so you take him. That's it. It's not more complicated
it's
than that.
Dangerous if you've got 14 and you trade to 12 and the rest of the league has 12 or 11 or 8. You're not going to find a trade back partner there. And that's where you get yourself stuck. And I'll give you another example.
He was 22, by the way. Farley was 22.
Along the lines of what you're talking about, here's another example to contextualize for people. I think this is good when we build this together. So you heard that about Farley. I heard this about Des Fitzpatrick. They had tiers of wide receivers, right? And so whatever tier Des Fitzpatrick was in, he was the last guy of that group, right? They get to the back of that group and they think, holy shit, if we don't get Des Fitzpatrick, we're going all the way into the next tier. And we've already are at the back end of this tier. And we thought we had to get somebody, not panicky, but like we came in and we said, well, at least we're going to get somebody from this tier. Now, the way things have unfolded, we're slipping out of that tier. We got to go up and get the last guy out of that tier who we feel really good about. And so they make a move up to get Des Fitzpatrick. Now, they had a totally incorrect read on Des Fitzpatrick, which is another story, right? But in the moment, it's a reasonable thing to them to say, we've got, A, B, C, D, maybe he's at the back of D, but we feel like between D and E, there's a big gap and we got to get somebody from D.
Also, why would you not have Amon-Ra St. Brown on that tier? I don't know. That's another question altogether.
If Amon-Ra St. Brown is in the next tier, that's some assessment difficulties.
You probably should have put Amon-Ra St. Brown in that next tier, and then you didn't have to trade up to get Dez. You could have taken Amon-Ra.
Or it should have been 2 tiers ahead.
There you go. Like top tier. Ed Henry says, does the value of the talent merit first round grade or the position they play? I am under the understanding that is the talent. It is for example, the Malachi Starks is a first round grade in this draft, the safety out of Georgia. Is he a position of need for the Titans? Maybe a little bit, but not like top need. But if they've got him, this would be fascinating if they trade down to like 12. Because I think Tyler Warren is a first-round grade. Penn State at a tight end. Those two guys, tight end at a Penn State, excuse me. Those two players, in my opinion, are clearly graded as first-round picks, in my opinion. Now, that's not sourcing, or I'm not saying that the Titans think that. I'm just saying my opinion. And if they are picking 12, and those two players are the last two on the board, or one of them goes 11 and one's sitting there at 12, it may not be the position of need that you think is most important. But if they've got those players as first round quality football players, sometimes you got to take that guy, and he's not a position of need necessarily. Although safety, Malachi Starks would make this team they would make this football team better, just for the record.
And I think this is where you get into the vertical versus the horizontal, right? So you're going vertical, you get to that spot vertically. Well, an edge there or a tackle there in that vertical spot would be more valuable. But then you go horizontally, and the safety's on the same line. Maybe the what other position were you talking there is on the same line. The tight end, they're just wider out. So you'd rather be closer to the middle where positions of value are.
Right.
But the safety and the tight end could be, graded very similarly. They're just further from center because those positions are not the positions that are considered to be the positions you have to have most to win football games. You want an edge first or a tackle first because you figure you can find a safety later who's closer to that safety, unless that safety is, he would be higher up vertically.
I think Ashton Genty's another perfect example of this. I think he is clearly a first round graded player.
Yes.
And if you're picking 12, he might be the only one on the board. And if he's the last top first-round player, is he an immediate position of need? No. Do I think, and as I said on Friday, do I think the Titans are absolutely going to draft a running back in this draft class? Yes, I do. And I think it's the depth of the class is way better in the back end. Round 6 and 7, 5, 6, and 7, you can get a really good running back. But if they're sitting there and he's available, do they stay in that board vertically or do they go horizontally? That position might be the one position where you go, no, we're going to pass on a first-round player.
I mean, what do you do? Ashton Genty's a terrific prospect. But what do you do with him right now? Where are his touches coming from?
He's your starting running back.
Yeah. And so then you're just taking your best player on offense and turn him into a backup.
No, I know.
And now you've taken another pretty good player on offense. It's good in space. I mean, we can argue over and over about him being overdrafted, Tajay Spears, but when he's healthy, in those last couple games, you get the ball in space, particularly as a receiver, he's a weapon. And so now you're taking your depth chart and I don't disagree. Like Genty is a super value, but you're effing up your depth chart.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. It's why I think the Tyler Warren and Malachi Starks are good examples. Because I think
I'd take either of those guys. You just can't take them first round.
No, I agree, but both of them start immediately and make your team better.
Yes, absolutely agree. So, but then you're stalling on your holes, depending on what you've done in free agency, presuming you need a top flight edge, presuming you need a right tackle. Boy, you're being patient.
Andrew says Henderson looks like the best value back. I think Henderson's going to move up draft boards. Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, as I assume who he's talking about, he is going to move up draft boards, I think, very fast. What I think is interesting, and I think I can't remember who said, Andrew says this, you could trade back to 6, 7, or 9 and get a lot more. I think ultimately, and I talked to Matt Miller about this, it's on the YouTube page. You can check it out. It was on Friday's show as well. I played the whole interview for you. But he says Abdul Carter's number 1. He put Abdul Carter to the Titans today in his mock draft. He thinks he's the best player in the draft. I've come around on that. I think him and Hunter are the only two worth taking at number 1, but I think Carter, not a great number 1, but I think is worth it at a position of need and is going to be a dynamic pass rusher for this team for the foreseeable future. But he says there are 5 elite players. He put Mason Graham out of Michigan in there as well. He had Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter in there as well, and I think he had Will Campbell and Will Johnson as his top 5.
The other
I think
corner.
were the top 5.
Yeah, I've heard that about Johnson.
Will Johnson's very good, was banged up a little bit this season, but he's very, very good player. He's the kind of guy Denard Wilson likes. Long, rangy, physical, can roll him up into man coverage. What's interesting...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say moving to 6 or 7 takes you out of maybe that top tier, but it does put you right into the middle of the second tier of edge players, which is Michael Williams out of Georgia, Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. I think Shamar Stewart made a lot of money and is moving up draft boards, but I'd be okay trading down to 10, 11, 12, honestly. Like, I think you get as much as you can in return. You stockpile as many picks. I think James Pierce, for me personally, moving down boards. For me personally, I think there's questions about how much he loves the game, so I'd move him down some boards. But there's a couple other edge players. Jalen Carter is sort of a hybrid player that you can get. The Jaheed Campbell kid out of Alabama is going to move up boards, in my opinion, so keep an eye on that. He's kind of a hybrid edge, tweener, pass rusher. Similar to Harold Landry, honestly, but with more explosiveness. So I don't know. I think nothing has changed for me. I don't like either of these quarterbacks at 1. I would go move down to 6 or 7, get as much as you can this year and next year, and go to work.
Final thought. Let's take the Genty conversation we just had, which would have been more like 12. And we're talking about you can't really do it based on what you have roster-wise. Let's move up to 3 or 4 conceivably, and Hunter is there. And you're really big on Hunter. Maybe you don't think generational talent, but you think he's excellent. Titans are pretty good at corner. I mean, they're pretty good at corner even without L'Jarius Sneed, who I think you have to think is going to resurface and contribute, right? Even with the Woozy not playing well and being slow. Brownlee is a good young talent. Baker, I thought, made a pretty good showing. They've got some numbers there. It's their deepest position on the roster, I would argue. You consider
he's a receiver. He's a receiver.
I don't think he's a receiver.
I think he's a receiver. I think, and so again, Matt Miller said this to me. I said it last week on the show before I talked to Matt. First of all, we don't know what he wants to play.
Doesn't matter.
He'll be asked that at the but he'll be asked that at the combine, so he'll have a chance.
That doesn't matter.
He'll have a chance to say, I agree with you. On this team, to your point, he is much better. He's a much more useful player at receiver. He's an immediate starter at receiver.
He's a corner.
Okay, we'll see. That's possible. You cannot play both ways and do a limited package, though, on defense. You can't be a full-time receiver and then come in on 3rd and 12 on defense. That's not how that works. It's just not how it works. You can't train. You can be a full-time defensive player and have some trick plays or some stuff that's put in for you to come in and play 7 or 8 snaps a game on offense. It can go that direction. It can't go the other direction, from what I understand.
Well, yeah, it's hard to make it small enough. A nickel is a big position. A dime might be small enough.
And those are critical play, like 3rd and 14. Those are critical plays, generally speaking. You have to be on top of your stuff. A lot of times you're bringing in a guy on a gadget play on offense on a 1st and 10 from midfield, right? To kind of do something a little different, a little bit more creative. I just think he is. I don't think he can play full-time NFL corner in any man-to-man system full-time. I think he's a good player. I think he's a full-time starting, dependable wide receiver right away. He's good with his hands on the ball. He's good in space. Great return man. If you're picking 3, I would be totally comfortable with Travis Hunter, but I want him playing on offense. So
here's the game that goes. Austin Simpson says Jack Sawyer in the 2nd, instant team captain material. Is Jack Sawyer there in the 2nd? Or are we doing this thing where we just round up? I think he's a guy that might be a riser.
I think he is, but I don't know if he moves into the top 32. I don't think he's top 32 material. He's good. He's a good player, but I don't think he's up there. You got to you have to have traits. You have to have explosive off the page traits at that position in the 1st round. Mike Green showed us off the page traits at the Senior Bowl. Same thing with Shamar Stewart. So,
you're keeping me overtime here, Chief.
Well, you took me 10 minutes.
I was late.
You took me 10 minutes. What are you talking about?
You're right.
All right. Thank you for everybody in the comment section, of course. Nick and I are back on Thursday. We got SEC Football Live on Wednesday. Check out the Paul Kuharsky podcast as well. And maybe I'll keep throwing some words at you, Paul. You can throw some stuff up on the website. PaulKuharsky.com is the website. Yeah. Sinkers Beverages.
Come read the 2 pieces that Brandon wrote. Brandon?
Did you just call me Brandon?
Brandon and Braden. The 2 names that your name is created from. The 2 names your name is created from. Brendan Gall wrote 2 pieces at
Brendan Gale.
PaulKuharsky.com. Both very good. One on how you know if you're finding a young quarterback, and another with Senior Bowl guys who might be fits for the Titans. So come and read those. And
there's a freshman House of Representatives in the U.S. Congress from Texas named Brandon Gale. It's just too close to what everyone's called me my whole life. So
good.
Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Seriously, call my guy Willie and say, look, I want some meats for Sunday. Go call him. He'll take care of you. I promise you it will make every single member of your party on Sunday happy. You will be the star of the show, you and Kendrick Lamar. So go check it out. For PK, I am Braden Gall. Thank you for listening. Thank you for hanging out. We will talk to you guys next time.